So I have created a new React.js project, removed all the boilerplate codes or unwanted files, and I'm going to run the project. Okay, so you can see the project here. So next I'm going to create the new component that is sign in. So in the components folder, I'm going to create the new component that is signin.js. Now I'm going to design the sign-in component. So for that, I'm going to call the sign-in component in this app.js component as like this way. Okay, so now you can see that here is the sign-in component. So when we look the LinkedIn website, you can see that this is the first page that will arise when you open the LinkedIn website. So I'm going to first create this first page or sign-in page. So here you can see that here is a LinkedIn logo. And also you can see that here is text that is find jobs through your community. Then there is text boxes for adding the credentials or the email, phone, and a sign in button, Google, continue with Google, etc. And also a picture is here in the right. So I'm going to make a clone of this page. So for that, I'm going to use the Google authentication by using the Firebase. Okay. So first of all, I'm going to install the Material UI into our project. So for that, I'm going to the Material UI website. And I'm going to click on this installation button. At that time, you can see that we will be redirected to a page where in the beginning itself, there is a command for installing Material UI into our project. So I'm going to copy this command and to run that command in the new terminal of the project. So now Material UI will be installed into our project. Okay, so Material UI has been installed into our project. We can see that in the package.json. Okay, here is the Material UI. So next I'm going to the sign in component. So you can see that here is a structure. So first of all, I'm going to divide that page into two parts. That is the part which contains the logo and the text fields and the button, sign in button, and also the part which contains the picture, this developer picture. Okay, so for that, I'm going to use the grid from the Material UI as like this way. In the first grid, I'm using the container as the props. And in the second grid, I am going to use the item as like this way. And I'm giving sx is 6. And I'm using another grid along with this grid and I'm giving it as 6 itself. So now you can see that sign in component or sign in page is divided into two parts. That means this is the authentication part and this is the developer or image showing image part. Okay, so now you can see that here. Yeah, we have divided that into two parts, that is authentication part and a developer image part. Okay, so in the authentication part, I am going to implement the or use the LinkedIn logo and also this text field and button from the Material UI. So I'm going to use the LinkedIn logo from my device. So for that I'm going to create a folder named images and I'm going to import that image from the desk from my system as like this way. And next I'm going to use that image inside the sign in component as like this way. Import LinkedIn from. Okay, so now I'm going to use that image inside the image tag. Inside the source, I'm going to pass that LinkedIn as like this way. So now you can see that the LinkedIn logo. So next I'm going to reduce the size of that image tag as I'm giving the style such as width 100 px So now you can see that the structure of the logo is like this way. Okay, so I am going to give it as 130 px. Okay, next I am going to use the text field and button from the material UI. So here in this authentication section, after the logo, I'm going to give a div here. Inside this div, I'm going to use this text field component as like this way. I'm giving the size of the text field as small and the variant of the text field as outlined. Okay, so now you can see that here is the text field and I'm giving the label of the text field as username. Okay, so here you can see that I'm going to increase at the width of the text field. So I'm giving SX tag inside this text field as like this way. And I am using the, or I am giving the width to 300 px. So now you can see that the width is increased. So I'm going to remove this size property and I think it will be as like that of this. Okay, then I am going to increase as the width again. That means I'm giving the width to 400 px. Okay, so here you can see that this is the structure now. Next, I'm going to give the label also. Here, I'm giving the label as enter username. And now you can see that here is the label and I am giving a BR tag to below this label. Okay, now you can see that this is a structure. And also I am giving the style as margin top. Okay. Next, I am giving the or using the button field or component from the material UI. So I'm going to use the button as like this way. Here I'm going to use the BR tag and after that I'm going to use the button component. I'm going to give the name of the button as sign in. Also I'm giving the variant as contained and I'm giving the width of this button as same as that of the width of the text field. So I'm going to copy and paste that same style here. Okay, so now you can see that the sign in button here. Okay, so I'm giving the border radius also as the style. So I'm giving as border radius to 50 px. Okay, so next I'm going to give the size of the button as okay. So now you can see that yeah, here is the text field and a button, and I am giving margin top to this button also. So as like this way, I'm giving the margin top as like this way. So now you can see that yeah, I am giving margin top to 25 px. Okay, I think it is better. I think I can give the height of the button again. So I'm going to increase the height of. Okay, I think it is a right height. Okay. So next I'm going to give this text here there. So for that I'm going to use the h2 tag above this username section, that is h2 find jobs through this clone. Okay, and you can see that here. Okay, I'm giving the font weight also. That means style font weight 100, and I'm increasing the size, and also I am giving the color as like this way. I think it is brown. So here I am giving the style as font size to 60 will be fine. Okay, now you can see that here it is find jobs through this clone. Okay, then I am giving the color that is brown. So I'm giving it as color brown as like this way. Now you can see that I think it is not brown. So I'm taking the HTML color code and I'm giving the color as I'm picking color from here, this area. So I'm picking this color. So I'm going to copy that color and to give it here. Okay, so now you can see that the color of the text has changed. I think it is more similar to that. Okay, the next I'm going to give a padding left to this section. So here you can see that there is the grid. So I'm giving the style inside this grid, that is padding left to 50 px. So okay, I think it is much better. I think it is enough. I'm going to give padding much more. That means about 80 px will be fine. Okay, I think it is very fine. Next, I'm going to use the padding top also. Here, I'm going to give padding top to about 15 px. So now you can see that the padding top as like this way here. Okay, it's very fine. So I'm going to use an image from my system. I had already downloaded a image into my system. So I'm going to import that image into here. So I'm taking the image from my desktop. Okay, so this is the image that we are going to use here. So I'm going to import that developer from images developer. Okay, so I'm going to use this give this image inside this developer section. That is the second half of our sign in page. I'm giving this developer image inside the source tag as like this way. So now you can see that here is the picture. I think it is very fine. So next I'm going to give the style to this image tag here as like this way. So I'm giving the style that is width 500 px. Okay, I think it is very fine. It's looking very good. So this is the design of the sign-in page of the LinkedIn. And next I'm going to do is to give the authentication functionalities. So before that, I'm going to give this enter username label a style. That means I'm giving the color of it as a gray. Okay, so now you can see that as like this way. Okay, then I'm going to remove this div from here as like this way. We don't want that div here now. Okay, so you can see that this is a structure. So next I'm going to give the functionality of the authentication. I'm going to click on this first link, then we will be redirected where so here a page contains a get started button. So I'm going to click on this get started button. Then we will be redirected to a page. a page where we can add or create a new project in the Firebase. So I'm going to create the project by clicking the add project button, and I'm going to first give the name of the project. So I'm giving the name of the project as LinkedIn clone, and I'm going to click on the continue button. Next, I'm going to disable this Google Analytics of this project, and I'm going to click on the create project. Now a new project will be created in the Firebase, so we have to wait for that. So our new project is created in the Firebase, that is LinkedIn clone. So next I'm going to click on the continue button, and we will be redirected to the console of our Firebase project. In the sidebar there is a build button, so I'm going to click on this build button. Then you can see that there is an authentication button, so I'm going to click on this authentication button, and then you can see that I'm going to click on this get started button. So next I'm going to click on this Google authentication. So here you can see that there is native providers, that is email, password, phone, anonymous, etc. Additional providers, custom providers. So I'm going to click on this or select this Google provider or Google authentication. So here you can see that there are a lot of additional providers like Facebook, Apple, Twitter, GitHub, etc. So I'm going to click on this Google button. Then I'm going to enable this Google authentication. Then next I'm going to select my email ID, and I'm going to click on the save button. Okay, now you can see that here is Google enabled. So Google provider is enabled to our project, that is LinkedIn clone. Next, you can see that here is a project overview. I'm going to click on this project overview and project settings. Then when we move downward or to the bottom, you can see that there are no apps in your project. So I'm going to create an app in my project. So I'm going to click on this web icon. So here you can see that there is iOS, Android, and web. So I'm going to click on this web icon. So we are creating the website here, and I'm going to give the name of the app as LinkedIn clone, just like this way, and I am going to click on this register app. Next, you can see that as a second step, that is add Firebase SDK into our project. As I am using the npm, I'm going to copy this npm install Firebase command and run that in the terminal as like this way. So now the Firebase will be installed into our project. So Firebase has been installed into our project. So here you can see that in the package.json. Okay, so next I am going to do is, in the Firebase documentation, you can see that after installing the Firebase, here is a code snippet. So I'm going to copy this code completely, and I'm going to create a new folder, that is Firebase. And inside this folder, I'm going to create a file, that is setup.js. And I'm going to paste that code completely here. So here you can see that I'm going to first remove the commands as like this way. Okay, then here is the Firebase config, which contains API key, auth domain, project ID, etc. We don't want to bring any changes to that Firebase config, so I'm going to minimize that. So here you can see that we have initialized the app using initialize app, or importing initialize app from Firebase app. After that, the first thing that we need to do is import one thing from Firebase auth. Next, I'm going to define a variable, that is const auth is equal to, and I'm assigning the getOuth function into it. And next I'm going to do is to pass the app variable into the getOuth. So whenever we are using this authentication from Firebase or the Firestore database, we have to do this thing. That means we have to give the app app variable into this function which we have imported. Okay. So next we need to use this auth variable in other files. So I'm going to export this auth as like this way. Then now we can use that auth in other files also. So next I'm going to implement the authentication in the sign-in component. So for that, next I'm going to do is to click on this continue to console button. Okay. Then in the sign in component, I'm going to do is to define a function that is sign in with the Google, an arrow function, and I'm going to use the sign in with the pop-up. Okay. So I have imported the sign in with the pop-up from Firebase auth as like this way. I'm giving the async await and I'm giving the try catch here. So next I'm going to give this sign in with the pop-up function inside this try. And after that, I'm going to calling the sign in with the Google function in this button, on click of this button as like this way. Next, after that, I'm going to give auth inside this sign in with the pop-up function. So auth we have already defined in the setup file. So inside this setup file, we need to define another variable. That is, I'm going to import Google auth provider as like this way from the Firebase auth, and I'm going to define another variable that is Google auth or Google provider, anything. And I'm going to assign that Google auth provider function into this Google provider as like this way. Then as usual, I'm going to give this app variable inside this Google auth provider as an argument. Okay, here const. Okay, so we have done the setup file, and next in the component file, I'm going to use that Google provider which we have defined in this setup file as a second argument into the sign in with the pop-up function. Okay. So now I'm going to click on this sign in button. At that time, you can see that a pop-up will be arrived from this. We have to select our mail ID. So I'm going to select the Google account. Okay. So now you can see that the user will be logged in. So when we go to the Firebase project and I am going to select this project overview button in the sidebar, you can see that we will be redirected to this section. And here I am going to click on the authentication. So now you can see that here the user is logged in. There is showing the user in the list. Okay. So for understanding the user is logged in our projects, log the auth here. So we know that auth we have already defined and we have imported in this page. So I have logged this auth in the console. So now I'm going to take the console and you can see that here in the console there is an auth is available or logged in. So I am going to click on this auth and we can see the results as like this way. And here inside this auth, we can see the current user, that is current user with the email ID and developer display name also is available. So from that, we can understand that the user is logged in. Okay. So next I'm going to do is to use this username text field. So here I'm going to define a state. So here I'm going to define a state username set username. Okay, it's like this way, which is equal to the username. Okay, so next I'm going to do is to give the set username in the on change of this text field. So here I am giving the set username as like this way, and I am giving e.target.value. So next what I am going to do is I am going to create a collection in the Firebase, and I'm going to do is to add the username that the user is giving in the text field. Okay, that's what I am going to do. So for that, in the sidebar, you can see the build button, and I'm going to click on the build button. And in the drop down, you can see along with authentication app check, there is a Firestore database. So I'm going to click on this Firestore database, and we will be redirected to this section. And here I'm going to click on the create database. So when I click the create database, we have an option for selecting the start in production mode and start in test mode. So I'm going to select the start in production mode, and I'm going to click on this next button. Next, we need to select the location. So I'm going to select the Mumbai as a location and click on the enable button. So now you can see that this is the database of the Firebase project. That is LinkedIn project, LinkedIn clone. Okay, so now I'm going to add the collection into this database. So we can add manually the collection by clicking the start collection and giving the ID as like this way, and giving document ID and the fields, etc. But I am going to add the collection from our project itself. That's our need. So for that, I'm going to do is in the setup.js file, I'm going to import another function from Firebase Firestore. Okay, as like this way. Then the function that I am going to import is get Firestore from Firebase Firestore. Okay, so as like this way, as like the Auth and Google provider, I am going to create or define another variable that is database, which is equal to, I'm assigning this get Firestore into that database, and as usual, I'm giving the app into that get Firestore as an argument. Then next, I'm going to export this database here. So now we can use the database in other files also. So I'm going to use the database in this sign-in file, sign-in component. So for that, for this creating of the collection, what I'm going to do is to define a function. So that is add user. So that is the function that I'm going to use here or define here as an arrow function. And I'm going to use another function from the Firebase Firestore, that is add doc. So I have imported that add doc from Firebase Firestore as like this way, and I am giving async await and also try catch, and I'm giving the console dot error here. Okay, the next I'm going to do is to call this function inside this sign in with the Google function. So before that, we need to define a variable that is user ref. Inside this variable, I am going to use a collection function as like this way, which is imported from the Firebase Firestore. And in the collection function, as a first argument, I'm going to pass the database, which we have already defined in the setup file. And as a second argument, I'm going to give the name of the collection, that is users. Okay, so next I'm going to give this user ref inside this add doc function as a first argument or the argument. And as a second argument, I'm going to give an object. Inside that, I'm going to pass this username as like this way. I'm passing the username into that add doc function. Okay, so now you can see that we have defined a function that is add user for adding the collection or creating a collection in the Firebase database. So for that, we have defined a user ref variable in which we have used the collection function which is imported from the Firebase Firestore. And inside that collection function, we have passed the database as a first argument and the name of the collection as the second argument. Okay, and also we have passed here the username. Okay, next I'm going to call this function after the sign with the pop-up function. So as add user. Okay, then next important thing that we have to do is here you can see that we are in the data section. So I'm going to click on this role section and you can see that. So next I'm going to do is to convert this false into true and I'm going to click on the publish button. At that time you can see that the changes have been published. Okay. So next I'm going to do is here we are going to create the collection named users. So I'm going to click on the sign in button after giving the username. So I'm giving the username as developer me and I'm going to click on the sign in button. At that time you can see that a pop-up will be arrived and the user will be logged in after selecting the Google account from the pop-up. Then next we can see that when we go to the database of our project LinkedIn clone, you can see that a new collection will be created. That is a collection with the name username users that we have already given here, and it have a document with a random ID. Next, it contains the username which we have given from the LinkedIn sign in component or page. Okay. So next I'm going to give is if the user clicked on the sign in button without giving the username, we need to show the warning there. So for that, I'm going to use the React Toastify. So for I'm going to the React Toastify npm. I'm going to click on this first link here, and I'm going to copy this and to run that in the terminal. So now React Toastify will be installed into our project. Okay, so now React Toastify has been installed into our project. We can see that in the package.json. So next I'm going to do is when we go to the documentary of this or npm of this React Toastify, you can see that when we move downward, there is an example. So the thing that we have imported, we have to import from the React Toastify is toast container and toast. And also we have imported a style. So I'm going to copy this completely and to paste it in our project as like this way. And next I'm going to do is to use this toast inside this sign in with the Google function. So here I'm going to use that toast as like this way. Toast.warning. So I'm giving that please enter username. Okay. Next I'm going to use the toast container here and I'm giving the auto close as 2000 and also I'm giving as position that is top right as like this way. Okay. So next I'm going to do is to give a condition here. The toast warning should be shown whenever the username is not present there. Okay, so whenever the username is not there, we need to show the warning. And also I am giving the, and also I have given the condition here. That is whenever the username is present, then only we need to call that function sign in with the pop-up. Here also I am giving, that is whenever the username is there, then only we need to call that add user function also. Okay, so now you can see that whenever I clicked this sign in button without entering the username, it will show the please enter username warning here. Okay, so this is the sign in component or sign in page of our LinkedIn project, LinkedIn clone project. I think it is very useful to you. 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 It is